PCCEP tonight. Tonight, we're going to have hopefully a robust discussion or a good discussion around the mental health directives that are now up and under review. Okay. Wow. Doesn't ring. The phone never rings until I'm trying to do something. That is so weird. Okay. So we're going to start off with going over our group values. Can someone bring that up on the screen, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm Claudia. I'm the PCCEP project assistant, and I'm going to go ahead and read off the PCCEP values for everyone. And after we read the values, we'll also be going over a few Zoom housekeeping rules. The first one is, oh, one second. I have something on my screen that's blocking. There we go. Okay. The first piece of value is listen effectively and respectfully, share airtime, be present and open to new information and perspectives, assume positive intent, respect each other, respect the group, speak your own truth, communicate directly, honestly, and respectfully, ask questions to clarify, call out bias, and be okay with ambiguity. And then after this, we also go over our Zoom keeping rules, and pretty much we really just, as staff, we watch out for Zoom bombs. And we also moderate the chat box, and we just ask everyone to please hold your public comments until that public comment period. And here's a quick look at the list of housekeeping rules as well. And feel free to just leave your camera off if you feel so. And these are the rules. So thank you, guys.
All righty. Wonderful. Thank you. Well, now we're going to move into introductions, and we have a wonderful question that we decided we're going to launch tonight. And I'm going to let Barb basket, and then we can do our introductions and answer maybe if you want the question. Rolling, Barb.
Do you have a collection of anything? If so, what?
That is our question for this evening. And I'm going to start out, and I'm going to say, my name is Amy Anderson. I'm the chair of the Behavioral Health Subcommittee, and I collect M&M dolls and stuffed animals and all kinds of things that are M&Ms. So I'm going to pass it off to, let's go to Ness. I see you on my screen.
Yeah, hi, Amy. Thank you. My name is Ness Zolan. I'm here representing the mayor's office this evening. I'm the legislative director in the mayor's office. And, you know, when you first asked that question, Claudia, I couldn't think of anything. And then I realized, well, over time, I've started to collect a bunch of different musical instruments. I'm a musician as well. And I guess it's par for the course for me. So thanks for that question. Good to be here.
Okay, why don't you, usually what we do is kind of like, I call it popcorn. You pick somebody on the screen to call on.
Wonderful.
Do you feel like?
Yeah, sure. I'll go with Chase.
All right. I've not ever been much of a collector. When I was a kid, I had some I had baseball cards, but I can't ever stuck. I guess if you were to say I collected anything, I own all of the Office episodes because of we're in, like, the digital era. They're not even the DVDs. Like, I own them digitally. If the internet disappeared, my entire collection would be gone because I have nothing physical. So yeah, that's it. And I'm sorry.
That is a collection. That's important. Okay. Yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah.
And I've myself. My name is Chase Bryson. I'm the Crisis Intervention Team Coordinator for the Portland Police Bureau. And let's go with Claudia.
Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Claudia, the project assistant for PCCEP. I collect stones and rocks. My mom's done it since I was young. I didn't know it was cool back then like it is now. But yeah, so I collect different types of rocks and I cleanse them. And so it's just really fun to just get rocks or stones and like feel the energy that comes in through them. So yeah, that's my collection. I will pass it over to Sarah.
Hi, my name is Sarah Ames. I'm with the city attorney's office. I use she, her pronouns. And I was also going to tell everybody that I can't go walk a beach without picking up a rock or two. I try not to. And when my oldest child, they inherited the habit, and we moved them recently to a new apartment. It's like we were carrying crates of rocks from one apartment to the other. It was terrible. So anyway, it's congenital, I guess. And I'm going to go with Tia.
Ah, that's so funny. 3 in a row. I have also a rock collection in a round fishbowl glass, a glass fishbowl from picking up at Orcas Island, mostly in Mexico. And my mom has a rock polisher. And so the rocks that I picked up that I thought was so pretty on the beach have been polished, and they're even more pretty. That I didn't think that I collected anything until you two said that, but I was going to say I have a big room of boxes. This is so dumb. It's like I keep thinking, but I need the box instead of recycling it. I just need to recycle all these boxes I have. So that's the first thing I thought of, was boxes that I don't need. So that's it. Let's see here. And my name's Tia, and my pronouns are she, her. I am on the Behavioral Health Subcommittee for PCCEP. Okay, Casey Hetman.
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, my name is Casey Hetman. I'm a lieutenant at the Portland Police Bureau. I currently oversee the behavioral health unit. However, I'm going to be in that position just for one more day. Come this Thursday, I'm actually going to be transitioning into a new role. I'm going to be heading out to the training division to be a lieutenant out at the training division starting Thursday. So I've really enjoyed my time working with all of you in different capacities and getting to know you all better over the last couple of years. I'll leave you in good hands with Chase, obviously, and the lieutenant that's going to be filling my seat upon my departure is named Chris Burley. He's a sergeant who's being promoted on this Thursday. He is not foreign to this work. He was one of our first officers that did a co-response with a mental health clinician back, which predates BHU actually, when we had what we called a mobile crisis unit. He also spent a couple years as a sergeant within BHU as well. And for the last several years has been the team leader for our crisis negotiation team. He wanted to be with us tonight, but his calendar didn't drive. He's got this sprung on him just last week, and so he wasn't able to make it, but does want to make sure that he can attend probably next month's meeting and meet all of you and really give it the time that it deserves. So he's looking forward to meeting all of you guys. Not to dodge the question, I think we might be able to start our own rock collecting club, because that was what I was going to say. But I can take it a different direction. I grew up on the coast here in Oregon. And while I do like collecting rocks, I think the thing that I'm most drawn to is beach glass. And so whenever I can find a piece of beach glass, I'm definitely putting it in my pocket, and have found some cool stuff throughout different places in the Mexico versus other places as well. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for your time and having the opportunity to work alongside all of you guys. I have a lot of respect for you guys and the work that you do. So with that, I'll pass it off to Barbara.
Okay, so fortunately, I'm getting rid of my old paperwork collection. And then I collect art that you hang on the wall, but not like expensive or famous art. A couple pieces by my dad, you know, some local artists, this and that I found in a thrift store or something. And I'll say, Jared, did you, no, you already went, right?
No, I didn't go.
Okay.
But I don't have anything exciting. I'm not a collector of things. I guess I like to travel light and not have stuff. People for a while started gifting me different turtles because I, like the turtle. And so I kept those, I guess, because they were gifts and they're hard to get rid of. So I'll say that's my collection. I'm Jared Hager, he, him pronouns, with the U.S. Department of Justice here in my role as monitor a settlement agreement between the United States and the city of Portland. I appreciate you guys having me. Casey, I really appreciate your service to the BHU. It's been really good with your leadership, and I appreciate what you've done and look forward to working with Lieutenant Burley and Chase going forward, and good luck out there in training so they can use your good skills.
Thank you.
I will pass it to Mary Claire Buckley.
Okay, thank you, Jared. Good evening, everyone. I too am like Jared. I got on late, so I didn't catch the first question. I mean, or what the first question was, but I've caught on. And I gotta say, you know, for all the junk in this house, I don't know that I collect anything. But I'm at that stage of life where I'd like to, just get rid of some of this stuff. Don't really have any collections of notes. So sorry to disappoint in that area. Although, yeah, I was looking. Although I will tell you, I do like. Now that you make me think about it, I did for a while. I liked interesting or funny watches. So I have watches from that have planes that go around and trains and Irish ones and Halloween ones. It depends upon what season, but that's about the only thing I can think of that I have multiples of that I would say that I had. So anyway, there you have it. It just dawned
Well,
on
that's
me.
a mini collection. The word doesn't have to be, I mean, the amount isn't important. It's what are you drawn to? What do you
Oh,
like?
Yeah.
That's the kind, so your answer was perfect,
well, thank you, dear. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know who hasn't gone, so you'll have to help me there.
Well, we have Karen.
And Jackie.
Oh, there we go.
Jackie, Karen, and me, I think.
Oh, Judith, go for it.
I'm sorry, Barb. Thank you, Mary Claire. Hi, everybody. I'm Judith Mowry. I go by she, her, hers pronouns, and staff for PCCEP. And I have a weird little collection that I kind of inherited and then really kind of treasure. It's called motto wear, and there are these little like pictures and little things that are made in England, and they have a motto on them, like speak little but speak wise, or and they're very cute. They have little houses painted on them, and my mother was into it, and they're pretty rare over here, so that helps because I can't get too many. But the first thing I thought of is really the thing I most like to collect is friends. So I will call on Jackie.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jackie Thompson. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Senior Director of Crisis Services for Cascadia Behavioral Health Care. I don't collect anything, but what I talk about, and I do some presentations on mental health. I talk about self-care within the workday, and that has made quite the collection of Bath and Body Works soaps. I'm drawn to things that smell really good, so I don't think they stick around, but I have quite a few of Bath and Body soaps, depending on my mood. That's about everything I collect. And I think it's just the last Barb that we have.
And Karen.
And Karen. Let's go with Barb.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Barb. I use she, her pronouns. And I've collected keychains for a very long time. And Karen.
Yes, I'm Karen James, and she, her. And yes, my kids have beautiful mineral and rock collections that I just can't get rid of. And they're all over my house. They're beautiful. Good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Wow, we have a lot of gemstone folks in the room. I like that. That means we're all shiners, right? We shine a lot, like that brilliance. Well, tonight's conversation is kind of near and dear to my heart. So given that the mental health directives for the mental health whole section is being reviewed I kind of wanted to look at like just a couple titles tonight. So we didn't didn't have to worry about going through them all. The two that I'm most interested in learning about is the actual mental health crisis section, where it talks about the definitions in the directives, and some of the verbiage in there is a little off-putting to me, but I want to kind of bring it forward and go over it with folks. And the other is on the commitment. So how does someone who's in crisis end up, on a director's hold? And that's really important in this community. So those are the directives that I brought the experts in to talk about, because we need to learn what are the requirements, and maybe what are some of the limitations in the directives that we have to work around. So I'm going to let Chase and Jackie start the ball, and I'm going to roll it over to you guys. And can we put the directives in the chat, the links?
They're there.
Oh, there we are.
Thanks, Claudia.
Thank you.
All right. So I guess to start, thanks for having us. And I talked to Barb a bit about what might be helpful, and just to kind of set the stage for, obviously the directives kind of guide everything we do, but to understand how the directives apply, like in function, we thought that maybe just kind of like a base 30,000 foot view of like what crisis response as it relates to like the police bureau and the city looks like currently. So if you'll put up with that, we can do a quick overview of a few things, kind of like what the crisis system looks like, what are the different like paths a call or a person can go when they may be in crisis. And Jackie can talk about product respond and what kind of what their function is and what they're doing and how they're operating currently. And then we can move into your police officer custody or director's custody hold, kind of all maybe give an overview of that. And then things that people have questions around are disengagements, like with police choosing not to take someone into custody or make a choice to take someone into custody. So my goal is to have kind of like a quick overview of that and not monopolize all the time, because I understand you guys probably have a ton of questions. Some of which, like the Uber in the weeds policy questions, like obviously I teach our policy, but some of like how the definitions came about and stuff, I wasn't a part of writing these current directives, so I may not be able to answer all your questions there. But if that's good with you,
Yes.
I'll
Yes.
start.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So for 911 or crisis calls, a lot of them start with BOEC, which is our 911 dispatch center. And they triage most mental health calls, meaning they can send them to just your average patrol officer, or we have enhanced crisis intervention team officers in Portland that go to those higher acuity, kind of more challenging or complicated mental health calls. They also have the ability to transfer calls, even sometimes people's having feelings of suicidality, to the Multnomah County crisis line. If there's, they meet a specific criteria, like no weapon, no method, no means, they can just go to the crisis line and no police officer ever has to go. That never gets dispatched. The crisis line can also receive calls from the community, which can be sent directly to like Project Respond, or they can be provided resources. And then the crisis line will and can transfer to 911 if what they hear they believe might require a police or some other medical immediate response. So that's all starts like there's already kind of people like trying to help decide like where best does this call fit from like the time someone calls for help for someone or for themselves. If a patrol officer goes, just like quickly, all of our patrol officers get 40 hours of crisis intervention training between the basic academy in Salem and what we give them up in Portland. They can consult with our enhanced crisis intervention team officers. They can use the Multnomah County Crisis Line, and we really emphasize that they try to do that, and they can refer to our behavioral health unit, which I'll talk about in a sec. And then we put out a mental health resource guide for those officers, so they don't have to memorize all the services in the city. Those higher acuity or higher risk or more complicated mental health calls, and there's a dispatch criteria, which for brevity I won't go over right now. That's in the directive though. Those calls can get an enhanced crisis intervention team officers. Those officers are volunteered and vetted, and that's kind of the program that I oversee with the help of a bunch of different people, obviously. Volunteered and vetted, and they get an extra 40 hours of training, which we bring in people from, the community teaches a vast majority of that class from NAMI. We have peers come in. We have families of people with lived experience come in. All kinds of great resources come in and help teach those classes. And then that would be our response to like a priority call. And then all those officers have access to Project Respond clinicians 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They can just through our dispatcher say, hey, can I have Project Respond page to my phone? They can just talk to them if they're like, I don't know that I need you here, but I want some thoughts and advice, or they can have them come to the scene. And then the last piece with the police bureau, and then I'll pass it to Jackie to talk a little more about Project Respond. For the police bureau's response, we have a follow-up component, which is our behavioral health unit. And so those are made up of, currently we have 3 teams of a police officer and a mental health clinician, which happen to be contracted through Project Respond Cascadia. And those clinicians come in, but they're in our office full time. And so, we have a partner. I worked with 2 different partners in my time. I spent about 3 years on one of those teams, worked with 2 different mental health clinicians full time. And I can't say enough about how awesome that partnership is, being able to bring both skill sets together. And certain people don't want to talk to mental health clinicians and want to talk to police officers. And then other people don't want to talk to police officers and would prefer to talk to a mental health clinician. And we're able to offer both, based on that person's preference or whatever's going on with them that day. And so the behavioral health unit, those teams only do follow-up primarily. They're not responding to like emergency calls on the street. Officers refer people who they believe might need a little more extra time or attention or help connecting to resources. They'll refer them to the behavioral health unit. And then in the behavioral health unit, the best part is we have time. Most people are on our caseload for up to 30 days, really to build a relationship, find out like what that person needs, what are their needs, and our goal is to connect them to resources and reduce risk in the community. We have a drug and alcohol side of that. It's called the service coordination team. Again, I'm trying not to like make this a presentation and more of a conversation, so I'm going to keep it brief. If you have questions specifically about stuff, we can come back to that in a few minutes, but I will pass it to Jackie now.
Yeah, and I'll try to do the same because I just never know the audience. So space out as much as you need to if this is completely, you already know it. So I, just as Chase was saying, I help oversee Project Respond, which is one of the crisis mental health referrals that can go out from PPB. So that's a contract through the county to provide mental health crisis response 24/7 in Multnomah County. So anywhere in Multnomah County, we can be dispatched. How do we get dispatched? Directly from police or directly from the crisis line. So an individual can call for themselves, or a family member can call for an individual or a friend. And we are the people, unlike the crisis line can absolutely talk to individuals over the phone. And we are the ones that are dispatched when an in-person assessment needs to be done. We do a full mental health assessment, and we can absolutely provide resources, make referrals. But really for this conversation, what mainly we do is just do an assessment to see if somebody meets criteria for a director's custody hold. And that criteria is set very high, and there's a reason for that. But I always say that because I know it's really frustrating for providers and family members to watch somebody decompensate and not have us be able to intervene earlier. But why can't we do that? A director's custody hold is what you think of, that no matter what the person says, we can make them go to the hospital. And that's, of course, sometimes when we need to bring police officers in to help us enact those holds. And why it's such a high bar to meet is because you are taking someone's civil rights away. People have the right to choose their healthcare and how they want to access it and if they want to access it. We have a high bar that says if somebody is in imminent danger of hurting themselves or somebody else, then we can say that they need further evaluation, whether they choose to do that or not. And that is a very high bar. And we are doing everything we can, honestly, to try and figure out another possibility. And we are always looking for somebody to go voluntarily and give them choices to do that. But that is something that we go through. Who can do that? Only master's level clinicians that go through an extra training with the county can do that. So we have to be given that huge responsibility through the county and trained to do that extra assessment to really make someone go to the hospital. I really want to talk about the limitations of it beyond those things that I've already mentioned. A director's custody hold does not keep someone in the hospital. And so you'll kind of hear community providers or family members, all of the above, say, hey, we went through a lot for you to come put this person on a hold, get them to the hospital, and they were released. It's an even higher criteria bar to have them stay involuntarily at the hospital. And that's not what I am able to do. That's all within each hospital. What all I'm saying is, as Project Respond, is that this person needs to be transported if they meet that criteria. So it's just a transportation hold, and then the hospital decides after that if they meet kind of what layman's terms would be like a 24-hour, 72-hour hold, if you guys have heard those things. That's all on the hospital side. I only get to say whether that person is transported to the hospital for further evaluation or not. But otherwise, we do a lot of pre-engagement and engagement that just says, we're always doing the assessment to see where somebody's at. What does that assessment include? We're looking for vulnerability, of course, but even further than that, right? Like, does somebody know where they're at? Does somebody know how to safety plan with me? Like, really, we're talking about, for lack of better words, the basics, like person, place, time. And those things, when somebody is not oriented, get really scary. But even that doesn't meet our bar. Even if somebody's not oriented, that can be baseline, and they can know where resources are. They can know how to safety plan with me. Multiple things really do have to be met for me to put in that hold. When do we come out? We do run 24/7. We can be dispatched at any time, anywhere in Multnomah County. But I do want to highlight one, yes, we never shut down. We're never allowed to, nor do we want to. We understand that this is a very needed resource. We haven't shut down for COVID. We haven't shut down for the fires that seemed like forever ago. We always try to make sure we're available, but there is limitations to that. Just like you've seen in many different areas of public health and mental health, we've had people leave the industry. And we've had people kind of go to different areas. So no, we don't shut down, but absolutely we can be at capacity. And I've seen us be more at capacity in the last 1.5 to 2 years than I ever have seen. But that also matches, we've had more referrals than I've ever seen before in the last 2 years as well. And so we have ongoing conversations with PPB, we have ongoing conversations with the county to, of course, look at funding and make sure we have enough personnel to meet the need. But I just want to highlight that, like, no, we don't shut down. We always want to say we're available, but there's only so many teams. I want to just highlight that. So we really hit on always trying to reduce how long it takes us to get there, because a person who's in crisis should have very little lag time. And I always just want to highlight, like, there is a lag time. There absolutely is. We can be at capacity and not have a team available. And we do everything we can to try and reduce those times, but I never am going to say that that doesn't happen. And I'll stop there so that we can ask questions too.
And maybe I'll just hit real quick. So the other way that someone can be taken to the hospital against their will is a police officer's custody, which is essentially the same criteria, right? A person is danger to self or to any other person in need of immediate care, custody, or treatment for mental illness. And the bar is the same. It's a very high bar. The difference is obviously as police officers, most of us, there might be a few, are not master's level mental health clinicians. And so what I find with having Project Respond come out is they can find, the nuances in somebody that a police officer just, that's not our skill set. And they can really work with that person and obviously have a base understanding of all the resources way better than we do. And just the experience to help a person navigate that. So we also have that ability. We're not required to bring out Project Respond to take someone on a police officer's custody. We can do that. And there's times when we will call them to come help us. And there's times when they will call us to come help them. And in that case, really kind of once they show up, we're really just there for their safety or whatever. There may be some other needs. The person wants to talk to the police, but our goal is obviously to let them do their assessment as the experts. So that's police officer custody. And I think, let me see, I had a quick list. And then the other discussion, and I'll leave it up to you all, I guess, Amy or Barb. We can talk about disengagement, and I can give a quick overview of what is required of officers and just a uber basic explanation of kind of how we talk about making that decision. But obviously that's an incredibly complex discussion. And maybe if we ask questions about what we've talked about to this point, and then we can move into that, unless you prefer to just get all the talking up front and we can just ask questions. I'll leave it up to you all.
Yeah.
I'm back. Hello. That was wonderful. I think pausing and asking, for questions is a good thing, because that's a lot of information, and a lot of folks aren't privy doing this work every day to kind of see it from the rainbow I see it from. So they might have different questions. So I'm gonna put it out to the room. Are there folks in the room who have questions about what was presented already? And my second question is, has everybody had a chance to take a look at the directives that we're going to be kind of maybe going over a little bit tonight?
And real quick, sorry, I meant to mention this before, kind of as I went through, but really as far as attaching what we just said to the directives,
yeah,
the 850-20 is kind of our all-encompassing mental health directive that kind of drives how we're expected to respond to those calls. And then 850-21 really addresses specifically police officer custody holds in that. So that's kind of what we've addressed to this point.
Okay. First, I'm going to put it out there. Are there any PCCEP members with questions for either Jackie or Chase on this subject matter of what you heard? Oh, I see Tia's hand.
I was just wondering how Project Respond works with Portland Street Response, or if they work together.
Yeah, great question that I get asked often. We currently are in the process of making it more streamlined because there is a lot of crossover on what we both can do. And we want to be able to make sure referrals to each other just runs without community members having to call more than one number. So we're getting that mapped out. What currently it looks like is not a lot of overlap. They do more the pre-engagement de-escalation a little bit, but they do not go on calls where weapons are present. They do not go on calls where safety is a concern. They don't go on calls where it's the primary concern is suicidality. And they cannot do director's custody holds. So you could see that where one goes one way and one goes the other. And we really want to make sure that that's more streamlined. Like when they meet with somebody and they feel like it's to a point where a director's custody hold might be met, I want them to be able to just send that right over to us. And very similarly, if we've got back-to-back calls and we have some that don't seem as high acuity as some of the others that are in our queue, we really want to be able to refer to them. It's not perfectly streamlined yet, but it will be within the next month for sure. And so yeah, we will definitely work together. As far as like where and why, they sit with the fire department, and we sit with, you know, in a nonprofit that's overseen by the county. So it is very different funding. And when you're within a department like the fire department, that's a whole different union and set of requirements. Like very specifically, they can't go into residential units, you know, like a house. And so they're working out and mapping those things because they are going to go citywide here very soon. So we don't necessarily work together now because we both have our little niches, but we will be planning that out very, very soon. Yeah, great question.
Okay, thanks.
Of course. And Chase, I can totally answer that, but the question in the chat is, what is elopement? I think that's to you.
All right. And I'm trying to pull up the directive so I can give it, tell you exactly and not try to wing it. If someone has another question, maybe, what was that?
If you can see the chat, I was like, that's perfect. It's somebody that runs away.
Yeah,
like,
they disappear from the place where they're living, the environment they're required to be at, or the state hospital, or jail, or anywhere.
Or against medical advice.
Or to get married, yeah.
Or to get married.
Yes, at its core, that's it. If that works for you, I don't need to find it in the exact directive.
I don't think so. Yeah, it can be different facilities. Like for us, residential facilities, some of them are locked units and some of them aren't, but we still call it elopement when we don't know where that person is or something like that. And depending on where they elope from, there's state and city guidelines on what we need to do next, but those all get pretty specific after the fact and specific to what they left.
Yes, and so to speak to that, like there are times when if someone elopes, the police may have the authority or be directed to take them back to that place. But there are times when someone could elope and technically be somewhere where they're supposed to be and not supposed to leave, but the law does not give us the authority to go and physically like force that person to go back. And so that's a complicated area. And one of the reasons we have, you know, ECIT officers in the behavioral health unit to help navigate some of those tough questions when patrol officers encounter those circumstances, which is relatively rare where we're going and they meet that criteria for us to bring them back to where they were from.
Amy, Ness has his hand up, and then there's a question from Tia in the chat.
Okay, go ahead. Whoever's next. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Judith and Amy and Chase and Jackie. My question's twofold. First, I'm just curious, who sets the bar for that director's custody hold? Is it a county bar? Is it state, federal, state? Is that the nod head by Amy? And then the second part is when there's the consideration of a director's hold and that threshold is not met, what's the most common alternative that you're all seeing in the field?
I'm so sorry, I was answering that question. Just the last part again, what's an alternative like referral or what do we do if somebody doesn't meet that hold?
Right, if there's that consideration for the hold, that bar is is high and it's not met? What are the most common alternatives that you see?
It really depends. A lot of the time, especially currently, I would say honestly, pre-pandemic, there was a lot more services available. As you guys, I'm sure, are aware, there's a lot of wait lists now. So people's acuity have, in my opinion, gone up. And so I give you that preface in saying the majority of time we are coming on scene, it's somebody that does not want to engage in services, where I would say prior, it was very engaged. And you know, we use all of our skills possible to try and say that we are non-threatening and we are just trying to help, and we can leave at any time, but can I leave you some resources in case you're ever interested? But it's not as open a conversation as I would say it used to be. It's people that feel like they're being asked to leave an area, that they're considered a nuisance and all that kind of stuff. So I pull up and somebody's usually telling me pretty specifically to leave. So if they don't meet my criteria, I'm honoring that. And I'm saying, like, all of my engagement tools, whether that is, okay, I totally get that. That is totally your right. If you ever need resources, please call this crisis line. Please call us at this number, or, you know, go in, if, especially if they don't have cell phone or something like that, I try to say the nearest location to them, or a hospital that has a phone that they could use. And I try to leave them with the basic stuff, water, Band-Aids sometimes. And I try to do referrals, especially if I see something potentially medical. And again, that's kind of when Portland Street Response would be a great resource as well. They have somebody medical on staff. And there's a couple really small agencies that are pretty overloaded right now that I'll send referrals to. Like, if you're in this area for outreach, can you check on this individual? Their foot looks terrible or something like that. But otherwise, if somebody's willing to engage with me, it depends on what they're looking for. A lot of times it's really basic need resources. So I'm talking about shelters. I'm talking about, do you know where food services are, especially because those resources have changed drastically during COVID and now. A lot of people, I try to make sure we have the most updated information, because rightfully so, they'll say, I went there for dinner, I don't know, a month or two ago and they were closed. And so I try to have those resources ready and available to say, oh, you're absolutely right, but I know they're back and ready for services, or somewhere near the location that I'm going to direct to basic survival stuff. Let's say it's a family member, right? So there's the housing, basic needs are met. It's usually mental health resources. And I'm usually trying to navigate those resources that have quite a few wait lists. Because sometimes you'll find out that if you get into primary care for an organization, that kind of puts you on a fast track for mental health. And I just try to be really open with that. Like, some people really, really do not want to talk about their medical. And I say, okay, and just try to warn them that there are pretty extensive wait lists right now for mental health services. And then I try to refer them to anything that doesn't have a wait list. Like, Cascadia has an urgent walk-in clinic. It's still very much about a crisis response. It's not ongoing care, but at least it's something, and they can walk in Monday through Sunday and see someone. So I try to do a harm reduction there. Harm reduction resources as well is something that I use, or SUD treatment. Pretty individualized, but overall, I would say if somebody's wanting to engage, it's about mental health. And the commonality is I've tried multiple times in the last few months to get in, and I'm waiting. And so I try to give resources that are available right now, but not necessarily long term.
For police, obviously, you know, we can call Project Respond, but there are times when, you know, and a lot of times we'll get a call on somebody for that, you know, like they won't leave my doorway, or they're out in the street, or they're, you know, yelling and screaming at an intersection, or, you know, and there's a lot of other calls, and officers may go do an assessment. And, you know, our goal and what's in our policy and just in the culture of the police bureau is we don't want to arrest people. If the underlying cause of the behavior, whether it's a crime or not, is mental illness or mental health crisis, we don't want that person to go to jail. That's not where they will get the help they need. But if they don't meet that high bar, it can be challenging because someone called and has a concern about this person or for this person or about their behavior, and they don't meet that bar, and so it's sometimes becomes like problem solving of like, is there anything we can do to help? And sometimes the answer is no, unfortunately. And in the behavioral health unit specifically, some of my most heart-wrenching, challenging people I worked with were people who you were watching, Jackie kind of mentioned this, watching decompensate and knowing that like they're not well, especially if you're working with their family or talking to their mom who is like, they need help, please help them, somebody in this city help them. And we do everything we can to try to we're pulling strings, we're making calls, we're calling Jackie, or we're talking to the county, or, we're doing everything we can to try to connect them. But sometimes you just hit the wall of like, either if they're not willing, then it's really hard, right? If they don't meet that bar and they're unwilling to engage in anything, we're kind of at a loss for what we can do for them. Even though knowing like they're just decompensating seriously, it's hard. And that bar is high, like Jackie said, for a reason. We're taking away someone's civil rights, and that's traumatic. No matter how much they need it or may need it, it's traumatic, certainly. So yeah, those are hard. They can be some challenging situations around that.
Thank you both. I just want to ask, did I miss the answer to the first part of the question about who sets the bar? Is it the county, the state for director holds?
It's legislation, Oregon statute.
Yeah, so it's the state level. That's
yes.
And then it's applied, it's applied by if a person goes to the hospital and the hospital feels like they meet that criteria, they'll put a notice of mental illness, which brings in the county to do an investigation. And they employ investigators who do an investigation, and they really work together with the hospital to decide if that person they believe meets the bar to go to a civil commitment hearing, which is more like a court proceeding where that person is an attorney, and then the district attorney's office comes in and provides and the civil commitment investigator and everyone kind of testifies similar to court. It's not in a courtroom. And then a judge in the end, generally with the assistance of some experts, makes an assessment of whether they believe they meet the bar, that bar set in state law.
Thanks. And then Barb has a question in the chat. I think Tia's got answered. Is that correct, Tia? Answered? Yeah. Okay. Barb, did you want to ask your question?
Sure, if Amy's microphone is on, it is. So can the crisis line directly engage project respond? So if I call the crisis line, who triages and decides if the police come?
Great question. So if you call the crisis line, there's a few different, parts of the crisis line. There's a resource center, but it wouldn't matter. You call and you are talking to a clinician. So same if they have master's level clinicians, they have undergraduate level, and then they triage the call that way. If it's like resources, it goes to undergraduate. They can do everything Project Respond does, which honestly is its own skill. I cannot de-escalate. I cannot do an assessment over the phone. It's just not a skill I possess. Right. I have to be in front of somebody. So it is an incredible skill. So they could absolutely talk about somebody about their suicide, give resources, everything that we do. They could safety plan with somebody, because we want anyone in crisis to have an immediate response. But sometimes that's not what's needed or anything. And yes, they can and do dispatch us. So they send us a page immediately. We call whoever was taking that call. So we get their backline information. We say, what's going on? So we get the name, address, what's going on. And then we immediately call whoever's referred, whether it's the person referring for themselves or it's a family member, to let them know we are on the way. Like, crisis line has dispatched us. Obviously, are we still needed? Is the person still there? Is there anything else we need to know? When does police potentially come in or get involved? when it comes to the crisis line can immediately switch the call over to BOIC. They can send and get BOIC on the phone, which is our 911 dispatch, and say, we are the crisis line. We need 911 dispatch to this address. And then they do their part in dispatching police. How is that determined? I don't want to speak too much for the crisis line, but I can absolutely say it's based on time. If they feel like, a great example is there's somebody that's unknown to the caller, but they see someone that seems very unaware and walking in traffic. Very scary. Project Respond can be dispatched and usually is at the same time, but we do not have lights and sirens. We can't go through stop signs. We can't go through lights. Who is the most immediate response to get there for someone's safety? Currently, it's going to be police officers. So that can be a way that they dispatch. So it's not necessarily just, this is a mental health call, it's going to go to Project Respond. It's also eminency. Can this person wait? No. If they're in traffic and they don't see traffic and they're going to get hit, we want police officers to go. And there's many different, areas. That's just a good example, and one that seems a little bit more clear cut than what the person taking the call has to decide. So who decides it? The person taking the call. And they go through a lot of training to decide that, and they have their own protocols and procedures about that. But that's definitely something that's very much factored in, is timing. We have just a car and we dispatch from a specific office in Northeast. And if that call is really far away, like we've been to Troutdale many times, and if let's say we're at capacity and the one team that we have that just got done with a call is in Troutdale, I'm letting the crisis line know that, so that if something else coming to them needs more immediate attention, we're on our way, of course. But police officers are the ones that are saying, like, they're going and they're timed and they're on it. So I hope that helps answers your question.
Well, thank you. That was an immense amount of information. To Ness, your question, I work in the industry with about 40 to 45 extremely complicated clients who, when I'm on call, get a lot of crisis calls about them, for them. It's very difficult to negotiate. A lot of times getting someone out on the scene, because sometimes the individuals disappear. Like, you'll want to send someone out and then the individual won't be there. They'll be ghost. You won't find them. And then you'll get a call an hour or two later, same scenario. But when you try to dispatch for help, the individuals are gone or left the building. So it's really complicated even for me to get folks help sometimes, because they're not always cooperative in their state of mental illness or psychosis. One of the things I am seeing, though, that's really big that I just want to put out there is a lot of folks out in the community get disconnected from services because their insurance lapse. Like, they're not eligible for OHP or Medicaid because they haven't applied in a while. And so care and access have to do with insurance. So I'm really thinking, as we go along, about finding a way to integrate what's called, there's a person that's certified to do like an assister. It's called an OHP assister. And basically they help people get signed back up to OHP, which will help them get service provision. If you're not signed up with Care Oregon, you probably won't get care. So the problems I run into is folks have disappeared so long, they're no longer eligible for services until they get reinitiated. Second thing is, for a lot of my people, jail is their safety zone. They want to go to jail. They want to do things that are small criminal acts because they can't get in anywhere. So they would much rather create a scene and get arrested and go back to jail for a while, because they know they won't stay more than a couple of weeks. That seems to be the time for the hospitals, for the jails. They keep them about 2 weeks sanctioned, 10 days, 2 weeks, and then they kick them out again without a plan. And the problem lies in the disconnect. Number one, individuals I find are hard to engage because they don't know you. And if they don't know you, they don't trust you. And if they don't trust you, they're not talking to you. So we have to find a way to make folks feel like we're really doing something for them, and maybe getting them reestablished with medical and food stamps would allow them to do their own thing, you know, as they see fit. So that's what I'm noticing in the community, is a lot of folks are just off the radar because they're not available to reapply, and OHP is not permanent. They make you reapply every year. So, and some people's every 2 years, but not much. So there's a lot of nuances, and then there's the IDs that people don't have that they need to go in and get care. So there's a lot of external things that are happening for folks that can't be met at the crisis nuance. It needs to be met at the social service nuance, where somebody could go in and help them get their ID, help them get their birth certificate. I mean, oh my God, it is insane how to get people set up in a system that you and I use normally. And a lot of folks are on disability, but they can't get their checks cashed because they don't have ID. So they have payees, they have money, but they can't get access to it. So I personally would like to see a response team, is somebody who could actually look into that individual's basic files, like an OHP assister, and say, hey, you know, your system is out of date. Would you like us to get you reinitiated or re-signed up? And then boom, they might be more interested in going in for treatment if their insurance is all lined up. So I'm just bringing that out there because these directives kind of, for me, kind of don't really lead to a way that really helps people almost solve their own problems rather than us trying to solve them. So that's just my take on it. But what I really wanted to talk about was the paragraph in the beginning of the advanced directive under mental health that talked about the subject. It was called mental health. I've been reading the state statutes, and they definitely say more than what we're saying about what it means for an individual who's considered in a mental health illness. They don't use the word crisis, but they literally acknowledge the fact that if an individual is unable to care for themselves physically, mentally, or emotionally, then they qualify as an individual in crisis and kind of thing, or an individual with severe and persistent mental illness. So maybe if we looked at the state statutes, which are also listed on the directives list, you list all the state statutes, but you don't spell them out what they say. So I'm just kind of wondering, I really want to ask Mary Claire if there are any particular nuances about these directives that, okay, I'll get to you in a minute. Do you want to chime in, Judith, or something?
I just wanted to offer a time check. It's 7 and wondered if you wanted to move into the specific directives. So it looks like you go in there.
Yes, I do, because it's really important. If we could just, if someone could bring up the first page of the first directive is where I would like to look at first, because that's where it lists all of the cross references to the state statutes, to the directives, to county statutes maybe, and we can start looking at the wording, because for me, it reads about the same as that PowerPoint presentation did. The wording, I mean, it's very seems written by an individual rather than following statute is my thinking. So, and I know it was written a long time ago, but I'm just kind of wondering if we can rework some of that language. Mary Claire, is that possible?
The language in the directive?
Yes.
Yes, that's what this process is all about. So we've posted it and it was up for its first review. I will say that it only got a few public comments, but as I told you folks last month, you know, you're welcome at least for the next 3 weeks or so, or, you know, a month to get your, you know, comments in. And if you, you know, spend some time tonight or next meeting, but we're hoping to, well, actually next meeting will be, we're hoping to get this post, you know, worked on during this month and get you a second version, or, you know, for a second review by early March. But yes, things can be, wording can be, and I will tell you this directive has not had any, substantive changes for a number of years. Partly, to be honest, because, this has been approved by the Department of Justice, and anytime we're going to make changes, we have to go, through, and get their approval as well. But given the amount of time it's been since we've done some, we are expecting, to be, let you know how it's working internally. That comes off of universal review, and we have what we call an executive reconciliation period. And that's when we consider the comments that we receive from the public, as well as go back to our subject matter experts internally, which includes all the folks at BHU and Summit Training, to see whether they believe, that since the last time we made changes, that there are things that need to be updated, either, better practices, what have you. And then we will, proceed to, revise, if appropriate, the language of these three directives, all tied together for mental health. But to your point, Amy, we cite statutes, the policy is not going to repeat the state statute or the county or whatever. That's why they're cited there. People go to that, but the policy is to, outline for the members, and Chase, can speak better to this because he's, has to be guided by all the policies of the Bureau, but it's supposed to give direction to the members as to how they are, to conduct themselves in these various situations. So we're not going to fill our directive with the, state statute. That's, it's cited there because if the member wants to go, it's a reference for them if they need to go and look at it or to refresh themselves, but it doesn't, it would make these directives much longer and more complex to, cite, to re-cite all the, statutes and ordinances and whatever that, relate to mental health in either in Oregon or what have you. So that's why we don't. Those just are all the things that are, are referenced either in our directives, but people would have to go to them on an individual basis to look at the wording of that.
Yeah, well, the
Okay.
dilemma I'm running into, Mary Claire, is that the state statutes seem to read much cleaner and more realistic than what I'm finding on the directives. That's why I'm asking, because I've been through and looking at some of the language in just a few of the statutes, and it's the language around describing someone who's presenting, quote unquote, with mental illness. Because I got to tell you, I'm learning right now that a lot of people out there are on the borderline of dementia now, and they're on the borderline of other physical brain damage scenarios that make them appear as though it's a mental health crisis, when in fact their brain's damaged now, and they're presenting with dementia presentation, which I'm telling you looks just like a psychosis event. So what I'm concerned about is the paragraphs on the very first page of the directive of mental illness might need to reflect more expansion on the cognitive disabilities, on the things that people have physically that cannot be controlled by medication, that cannot be always fixed by, a mental health therapist. So that's why I was reviewing the state statutes and the directives, because it doesn't speak to the other people who have other health conditions that look like mental illness. And that's why I wanted to review it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chase.
Just to speak to that, I agree with you. And in my experience, like just on patrol, and then especially in behavioral health unit, certainly we encounter people all the time where we're struggling. And you mentioned dementia, and that's certainly one that we've, struggled with. We're like, is this dementia based on age or something, or is this like some sort of mental health concern? We'll spend, a significant amount of time trying to figure that out. And I think what our policy focuses on is what do we expect of our officers in the moment on the street? Because you frame it very well that, you know, even doctors in the hospital might take days, weeks, months to, you know, develop a diagnosis for whatever may be going on. And so it's, you know, it's unrealistic to expect our officers to be able to diagnose. And so that's our policy focuses on recognizing signs and symptoms of mental illness. And certainly they could recognize something as a sign and symptom of mental illness based on, you know, their experience and whatever knowledge they may have. And it may not be that. But what we talk to them about is we're recognizing those signs and symptoms. And at its core, what our policy asks us to do is recognize that and then consider that in our decision making, right? Mental illness may be a component of this interaction. What does that mean for me in my decision making, in how I approach this person, whether or not I approach this person, where this person goes? Like if they're engaging in criminal behavior, but I'm saying, oh, this looks like it could be a mental health crisis. Well, maybe I'm going to do everything I can not to take this person to jail and try to connect them to a resource or get them to the hospital. And so that's really our focus. And it's hard, and I'll speak from my experience as an officer. You know, our policy manual is huge. It used to be in a book. It's not in a book anymore. The book was huge when they made a book. And, you know, we expect our officers to know a vast amount of policy. And they have to be kind of like, you know, knowledgeable on a million different topics, you know, how to, you know, investigate a sexual assault, how to investigate domestic violence, how to, you know, all the physical skills we're expected to know, how to respond to mental health crisis. And so we're asking them to do kind of that base level of assessment. And really we're focusing on their behavior, right? Like in the end, that person's behavior, and then considering that it could be caused by some sort of mental health crisis, which is going to change our decision making most likely. And so, you know, that doesn't speak specifically to the language, and I'm not a policy expert as to whether or not that should or shouldn't be more specific in the policy. But when teaching to the policy, we really try to break it down to like, what is being asked of you here at its core? And certainly de-escalation is a part of that consideration, and all of those things that are important. You know, are not always easy assessments. We certainly don't always get it right because it's challenging, as you know, in your experience.
Amy, Jared has a.
Jared, yeah, go ahead, Jared.
Thank you. That was a really great answer, Chase. I thought that's an excellent way to explain that you're not necessarily needing to diagnose it right, but understanding, recognizing the signs and symptoms, you can adjust your behavior in terms of how you approach, whether you approach. And that's what I wanted to ask about it. You know, that question about when you don't engage, what are you looking at there as an officer on the street? And I mean, obviously, if there's a violent crime, that's not an option. So when do you get to, how do you exercise that discretion? I think that's an important thing that you have. I'm just wondering how you go about doing that.
I guess it depends on when in the call you're talking about. Certainly there are calls, you know, that are challenging where someone may say, you know, I want the police to come and kill me. And they call, they're like, I live at this address, I want the police to come and kill me. We're not going to ignore that call, but we're also not going to go and just knock on that person's door. Because obviously that's the last thing we want to do. And so that might be a call. I don't know that not engaging would be what we do. And in fact, our policy says we have to make an attempt at least to engage. But certainly our policy doesn't say we have to go engage with that person if we think that it could escalate the situation or cause, you know, further harm to that person. And if you're talking during a call, certainly there are a lot of challenging calls where police officers choose to disengage, even sometimes when there's been criminal behavior. Or when the person meets that high bar criteria for a police officer custody or director's custody, officers have to do like a very challenging assessment, right? And you can have Project Respond there, but their assessment goes as far, and I explain it to Project Respond this way when I talk to them, and I explain it to our officers in a similar way of really there's two assessments on a call where someone needs to go into custody. Does this person meet criteria to be taken into custody? And we'll talk about it in police officer's custody or director's custody, but it could be custody for a crime. And especially where there's mental health crisis, if it's a low level crime, we will do a similar assessment. So you're assessing, does this person meet criteria? Again, I'll talk about it in police officer custody. That's my world. Yes, they do. Great. What does it look like to affect that custody? What are the risks of taking that person into custody? Now, if they're completely calm and they're like, yep, I do need help. And, you know, maybe they don't meet the bar if they are willing to safety plan like that. But, and we believe like, we're probably not gonna have to use force on this person. They'll probably just walk themselves to an ambulance and be, you know, willing to go to the hospital. Then, you know, the risk is relatively low there to that person and to the officers and to the community. Now, if we think that person, if he's going to fight us or maybe has a weapon or has a firearm, they may meet that bar, but then the officer has to do this like really challenging assessment of what are the risks of me taking this person into custody, even though they meet that criteria? What are the risks to me? What are the risks to that person? And then what are the risks to the community if we do take them into custody? But we also have to assess what are the risks if we don't take them into custody. And in our policy, it says we can't disengage from a call when there's an immediate risk to a third party. And that sounds kind of simple just saying it, but assessing risk to a third party is actually really challenging. Maybe they've been in a fight with their neighbor. And so then we have to assess like, well, how safe is this neighbor? Actually, can we have the neighbor leave for the night? You know, what actions can we take to mitigate risk if we feel like engaging with this person could result in a use of force or something challenging? I realize we're running short on time, but like kind of like a relatively common call that can pose some significant challenges is maybe someone in the alcove of an open business waving a knife around, and people believe they may be in mental health crisis or under the influence of drugs and alcohol. And obviously as officers, we can't know that from the top, but we show up and sure enough, someone's waving a knife around, not threatening anybody necessarily, but causing concern as people don't feel safe walking by, and this business maybe is closed and not letting people in and out of the business. So officers will show up and we'll do everything we can to de-escalate. You know, we'll probably be far away from this person. We'll block streets, reduce traffic past the person so we don't create a situation where we have to protect somebody if that were to be the case. And then we'll try to communicate with them most likely from a distance because obviously, you know, that's safer for everybody. And I've been on those calls where we might communicate for 4, 5, 6 hours with that person. And maybe we get nowhere. Like they are absolutely unwilling to come talk to us. They're unwilling to put the knife down. They're unwilling to go get help. You know, maybe the crime there is low level if it exists at all. There may not be a crime. And they might meet the bar for a police officer custody, but then we have to make the assessment. What do we do now? And I don't know if anyone has any thoughts of what that could look like. You know, what that decision might look like, but we've talked for 4 to 6 hours. The person is unwilling to put the knife down. The business is closed. Maybe people can come in and out a different door, but it's a business in the middle of the day. And we feel like taking them into custody could result in a, use of force up to including, God forbid, a serious high level use of force. And those are the decisions that have to be made. And that's an extreme situation, but is not all that uncommon of having to make those decisions. And there's a million things that go into that. And obviously every situation is nuanced and idiosyncratic with just based on what's going on in that specific situation. I don't know if that answered your question, or it might've just asked a different question. But it's a question.
No, you definitely, you answered it. I just, I know there's not one right answer to it. I just, I think it's an important thing to think about, and there are a million things that go into it. And I appreciated, that perspective of the officer and how it's difficult to make that disengagement decision during the call. And it's easy, I guess, on the front end because you don't have discretion. You got to show up. They dispatch you to a call, you're going to show up. And that's interesting. It's good to know. I mean, that's important for everyone to know. People talk about reducing contacts between, the police and those in mental health crisis or whatever. And if, if someone calls you, you gotta go. I mean, that's the reality of it. That's the way the system is set up now, at least. I mean, when there are co-responders, maybe they had different options, but right now it's send an officer, it sounds like.
Yeah, and obviously everyone has the same goal, right? Like good outcomes for everybody, the community, the person who called, safety for everybody, and that's our goal. And sometimes trying to achieve that goal becomes a challenge. And I frequently hear stories of how creative our officers get, or just some impressive work that they do, or incredible restraint that they show. Again, following our policy, which is recognizing signs and symptoms of mental illness and then considering that in their decision making, recognizing this person, maybe in crisis. And so, we're approaching this call very differently than we might just a criminal with someone who's committed a crime or serious crime and is threatening someone with a knife versus someone in crisis. And those are some of our hardest decisions. And frankly, we're not perfect. Sometimes we, when I hear of frustration from community members or, on calls, sometimes it's disengagements are a common topic, or someone feels like, and we get it from both ways though. Sometimes community is like, you shouldn't have disengaged. I don't feel safe based on this person's behavior and you guys just left. Like you were too afraid to engage with them, and now I'm in this, like I'm their neighbor or whatever. Or we hear it the other way where, it's like, we had to use some force and people, no one wants to use force, but that decision was made that was the risk benefit analysis was there. And then, of course, that doesn't always go the way we planned, because we only get to make half the decisions in an encounter like that. That person has choices and free will as well, although it could be impaired by some sort of crisis or mental illness.
Wow, that was amazing, Chase. Boy, this conversation could probably go on for hours, but we're kind of winding down. I just want to ask one more question because it's something that I'm kind of playing around with, and that is, in this day and age, so many folks are hungry, and they're cold and they're outside. Have you ever, brought food to consider as a barter, like maybe people are hungry and they're reacting out of that and go, well, I'll trade you food for your knife, or maybe like, are you hungry? Do you need something? Do you ask those questions like during the times when the individuals are like presenting to determine if maybe there's an underlying thing you could fix? Well, not fix, but address, do you guys ask that question?
Frequently. I've known, we've ordered people pizza.
Okay.
We have a brisk iced tea. Cigarettes are popular, very effective.
Yeah.
We've gotten people clothing. We've gotten someone a flashlight. I mean, and that's part of our basic, like we train that to all officers, like not even just PCCEP officers, is can you meet a need to come to a peaceful resolution? That's a de-escalation tactic. And like I said, our officers, I am frequently impressed with how creative they get to try to solve some of these challenging scenarios where there is no, I wish we could give them I struggle to teach on this topic because I wish I could say, here's your formula.
Yes.
Here's the assessment.
Yes.
This, if you meet this number, do this. If you meet this number, do that. But it's not that simple. And so we have like a lot of nuanced discussions, and we have scenarios where we kind of challenge them on some challenging or hard scenarios. And we talk about things that have happened in the past and how they may have gone or what may have happened and some of the decisions that were made and how they were made. And so it's a topic that I'm passionate about because it impacts everybody significantly, right? Like those are important decisions to be made for that individual, for the community, for the officers, everybody. It's a incredibly important decision and can have tragic consequences at times if you make the wrong decision, or sometimes, you may make the best decision you can. And unfortunately, things still don't go the way you planned.
Right.
By the nature of, those dynamic situations.
Well, thank you so much. Given the time constraints, I'm going to ask, is there any, does anybody have any like new business they would like to bring forward? that I can bring to the steering committee that isn't normally attending? Question number one. And question number two, is there a subject matter folks would like to talk about going forward?
And one quick one, when is the deadline, Mary Claire, for feedback? So I can put it in the minutes.
No, I'm sorry. I was just trying to answer you in the chat.
Thank you.
How about, let's say, you know, they're trying, aiming for much for, so how about 3 weeks from now? That folks have, and I know a couple of you have
Hey, the 22nd.
comments, and I appreciate that, but yes, and that goes for you too, Amy. If you've got ideas that you want, or you've thought about reading it and stuff, feel free to send them in and we'll consider them and see, you know, what we can do, or at least hope to address the issue you're raising. So
yeah, it's mainly about clarity, you know, giving people the right impression. And after reading that, you know, that big PowerPoint presentation that we just got through all talking about, it gave me a new lens when I read things, you know, as far as, yeah, this could be written better so that it's clearer, more precise, and is less what I call it antagonistic. What I read in, you know, what I read that some people write about doesn't reflect trauma-informed lived experience. It's sort of written by folks who might just be writers and not really understand the material. That's what I'm noticing, is a lot of things are written and not necessarily by the people who understand it the best. So on that note, we're going to meet next month on the 1st, I think, again, of March. Subject matter, I'm not sure yet because this is all so important. If anyone has any ideas on subject matter they would like to bring forward, be sure to email it to PCCEP at the distribution list. And thank you, Jackie and Chase, for your awesome discussion. I'm probably going to have to hit you guys up offline because, yeah, I have a lot of questions about language, just about what you said, Chase, about what you teach versus what you read, you know, and that's kind of, yeah, that's what I'd like to see put to language, is what you teach, because it's more passionate. That's what I feel. So anyways, on that note, anybody have anything they'd like to say? Final closing words?
Thanks for a good meeting, Amy.
Thank you. Thanks, Claudia, for all your hard work. And hopefully everyone gets a chance to read just read 1 or 2 pages of the first part of the first directive. The rest kind of fall in line with procedure. I'm not too worried about them, but the first section is where it all starts spelling out the definitions, what it means, what it looks like, how it presents to somebody reading it about mental illness. And that's the part I want to expand upon. So that's just me. So thank you all. And we will consider this meeting closed right on time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.